in the back. Thank you. Welcome to the talk I'm going to be giving about what we've been up to in the mobile team at Alfresco. I'm going to be talking through some of what we've got already, some of what we're planning, and I've got my colleague Jean-Marie here who's going to talk about some of the exciting new developments that will be coming shortly. So here's roughly what I want to cover, a quick introduction, what we've got in the store, what we offer in the way of SDKs, a little word about Accelerator, and then go on to the roadmap and some future developments. And then I'll talk a little bit about MDM at the end, but I'll mainly sort of refer you to a talk I'm giving with Mark Dubrisson, our product manager for mobile, tomorrow. So let's begin. So mobile development at Alfresco. We have Android team and an iOS team, we've had apps in the store now for a couple of years, and we've also had SDKs. Recently we did a lot of refactoring on the iOS side to rebuild the mobile app from the ground up on top of the SDK, so that we would be confident that you as customers can take that same code and produce the same sort of quality app. We also have, so we have a dedicated product manager, Mark Dubrisson, and we also have dedicated QA resource. So we're a team that sits alongside Alfresco One. In a way, we're customers ourselves of Alfresco One. We don't have any kind of private backdoors into the repository. We're using public APIs. We can't read things like share config and things like that. So we have a whole host of interesting problems that keeps the Alfresco One teams on their toes. Now, obviously missing from that picture is this guy, Windows. And it's something we're keeping an eye on. Right now, we haven't had a lot of demand for Windows Mobile. We're hearing it every now and again. People ask us, you know, what are our plans? And right now it's still at the, well, we're not sure. We want to put the resources into that right now. What we would want to do is build the stack as we have on Android and iOS. So from a CMIS layer with an SDK on top, masking all the various complexities of the various versions of the repository, and then finally the app. And that's quite an investment for us. If you know differently, please shout at Mark, who's stood at the back. Let him know that it's important to your company, and we can always reassess. I'm going to put this up a few times during the talk. It's a reminder for all the developers in the room that everything is on GitHub that we do. It's all open source. As far as we know, we're the only fully open source mobile client in the ECM space. And it's a nice split between the app and the SDKs. So you can either take our app and customize it to your needs. You can build your own app from scratch on top of our SDK. So there's some options there. But please do contribute. We are open to it. So just for those of you who don't know about our store apps, and hopefully that's a minority. So currently we have Android 1.4.1 just been released, had a couple of bug fix updates. iOS 2.01, so again we have an update that's currently sitting in review at Apple for similar sort of, these are updates to support the 5.0 server and some things that changed in the repository. And these are very much out of the box apps in that right now they don't support custom models, custom workflows, that sort of thing. And they're broadly the same functionality. I mean, yes, the teams kind of work at different paces, so some features will appear on Android first, some appear on iOS first. And also there's platform differences, so there's always going to be some things you can do on Android that you can't do on iOS and vice versa. That's just going to be the way it is. Android 1.4.1, or 1.4.0 introduced folder sync, advanced search, storage access framework, which means you can get to your Alfresco files and folders from other apps that support that framework. We improved accessibility and we added Japanese and Chinese localizations. As I mentioned earlier, the iOS 2.0 app was a complete ground-up rewrite, and I literally well, probably a few lines of code came across, but the general brief was don't copy paste anything across unless there's a good reason. Some of you may know the history of the iOS apps. We partnered with a company called Zia, who had an app already out there called FreshDocs. We worked closely with them because they'd done a lot of work already to expose the repository on mobile. And so we worked with them for about a year and a half, adding features to the app, but it wasn't quite where we wanted it to be. We'd already had some work done on the Android side to build an SDK and a good sort of layered framework. And we decided that we needed to do the same sort of offering on the iOS side. And we took a good hard look at the source code and decided that we needed to have this initiative where we had the SDK and app split. So we changed some things around. As a few of you might have noticed, so it's now single account focused rather than trying to spread some information across multiple accounts at the same time. And naturally, some features are still to be ported. I know some of you are missing the multi-photo upload. There's been some complaints that we no longer support self-signed SSL certificates. That was something that was direct feedback from some of our larger enterprise customers, that they saw that as a bad thing to have in the app. So we took some hard decisions, and it's kind of, think of it in terms of, if those of you use Apple products, they had a big reset and they have a whole load of negative press, and then features come back but built up in the way they want to be built up. And we're kind of doing a similar thing, though hopefully without quite so much negative feedback. The iOS 2.0 app also introduced folder sync, which means, as on the Android side, any files and folders you've marked as favorites will be downloaded and synced to your device. You can go offline and still have access to those. We also took the chance when redoing the iOS app to have a bit of a UI refresh. It's a similar layout broadly to the existing app, the 1.5 app. But we had some improvements. We moved some things around just to make extensibility a bit easier. And so everything wasn't hidden in a kind of extras tab. And we're quite proud with what we've done with, without doing a complete redesign. We've quite like how we've adapted this. Now, note on connectivity, and this is something that catches a lot of people out. It caught some people out when trying to connect the Android app originally. We use CMIS when we're talking documents and folders between the mobile apps and the repository. And CMIS, because it's based on AtomPub, deals with absolute URLs. And these cause people a lot of problems. If your Alfresco repository has something like an Apache web server in front of it, the mobile app, well, the Alfresco repository doesn't know how to build the correct URLs. So you get all sorts of connectivity problems. And we've seen this time and again, both through our support portal on Salesforce and also in the forums. This is all you need to do. In your Tomcat connector, add proxy name and proxy port attributes. That tells OpenCMIS how to build those URLs and lets your app connect. Now, one thing we do want to do is try and improve this kind of thing. In terms of if you can't connect on the mobile apps, we want to try and help you discover why. And it's something that I want to add to the apps, almost like a helper wizard. You can't connect. Why? Well, it looks like this is wrong. Go and have a look at this. So that's something that will be coming. But in the meantime, we're showing this fixes about 90% of the initial problems. Here's my GitHub slide again, just to prove that the apps are up there. The only thing we hold back, actually, is worth mentioning, is the keys. So things like the OAuth keys to cloud, we don't commit those to the repository because we don't want you using our OAuth keys for tracking purposes. So you have to generate your own to do that. We also have, we integrate with an analytics firm called Flurry. And we have a key that we use to track mobile usage. So that's also not in there. And we use a crash reporting service called Hockey App, which mobile developers may have heard of. that gives us feedback should the very rare occasion that the apps crash. We get the full, a whole load of feedback that we can analyse and improve the apps further down the line. So there's just a few keys that we don't push. Talk about what we've added to the SDK recently. So the SDKs are currently sitting in about version 1.3, and we've got some updates that we're going to push and tag shortly. In fact, shortly as soon as we get back to the office after Summit. So the 1.3 SDKs added workflow APIs, and we've added support for both legacy and public APIs. So we always support back to versions 3.4 of the Alfresco repository. And quite a lot changed in the repository from 3.4. We had a whole new load of public APIs arrive in 4.2. We've had the activity engine as well as the JBPM engine. We support all of that in the SDK, and we try to remove as much complexity as possible. Now, often that means, certainly when it gets to an app level, we have to simplify, and that's why we don't currently support custom workflows. But the SDKs do. On the iOS side, we're playing catch up to the Android SDK, so we added the people APIs so you can get to users, user profiles, that sort of thing. And we added 64-bit support as per Apple recommendations. Moving forward, we're going to try and make sure there's more Android and iOS SDK parity. The apps will necessarily differ, but the SDKs will be pretty much the same, to the point where we're working from the same design spec. So when we're thinking about the next versions, we first have discussions between the teams about what APIs we want to do, and discarding the differences in how you call those APIs because of the differences between Objective-C and Java, the signatures are very similar. And of course, we've got bug fixes and performance improvements, as we try and do that all the time. Whilst we don't measure performance directly, we try very hard not to make it slower. So we've added caching and things like that at the SDK level. The other thing I need to note is that we've got a whole new docs area, and the documentation team work very hard, and they work closely with us on making sure the SDKs are well documented, including getting starting guides, API references, and tutorials. So one of the first things that happens when we release, well, even at the spec level, is that the docs guys get involved and test that what we've said is right is actually right. And so there's sanity checking at the spec level, and then when we deliver the SDKs, there's another sanity check to make sure that it does what we say it does. So it's a good extra QA step. So the tutorials on there are very good. I'd definitely encourage you to go and have a look. Maintenance releases, as I mentioned, of the SDK. So there's some things changed around the session creation on 5.0 servers. The technical details are that the old WebScript CMIS interface went away, and that caused us a couple of problems when creating sessions. Because we work all the way back from, say the mobile apps work from 3.4.8 right up to 5.0, all the CMIS interfaces have changed across that. So we've had the WebScript interfaces, the CMIS Atom interface, and more recently the public interface. And what we do is we test to see which ones are available, and we just needed to move some code around to do that. iOS 8 was also an interesting one for us on that side of things. They managed to break a whole load of stuff, including us. So we have got a fix for that in place now. That was actually down at the CMIS level. It was actually a bug fix for something that they broke in previous versions, and then they fixed it and stopped us from working. So we're there now. So yes, the source code is available now, and I said binaries, we'll stamp them and release them through the normal channels shortly after Summit. And slightly predictably, there's my GitHub picture with the SDKs on. One other initiative that we had earlier this year was to look at hybrid development. Now, we know a lot of people don't have the resources to ramp up on both Android and iOS side to do native development. So we went away and we had a look at what people are doing in the hybrid space to build mobile apps. And the one that we were hearing a lot about was Appcelerator, specifically the Titanium project. We looked at PhoneGap. We're also keeping an eye on initiatives like Xamarin, which is gaining some ground. But right now we've got, in the Appcelerator store, we have modules for both Android and iOS. And they wrap the Android and iOS SDKs to enable you to write hybrid apps in Appcelerator. So you can use JavaScript and call down into the Titanium SDK, or you can use an HTML view, and that will work on both Android and iOS. At the moment, we're gonna hold development there. We haven't had a huge take-up. Again, if there's a lot of interest, please let Mark know. It's always good to get feedback about who's using this stuff, and then we can plan how we move these forward in the future. Creature of habit. It's also on GitHub, of course. So where are we going with Alfresco Mobile? So iOS 2.02 and Android 1.4.1. In fact, 1.4.1 is already in the store. This was taken from the San Francisco summit 2 weeks ago. So that's already out there. As I said, iOS 2.02 is currently in Apple review. So we're expecting that to go live in a week or so. And that introduced 5.0 compatibility and, of course, bug fixes. Looking longer term, so Android 1.5 and iOS 2.1, we'll be looking at how you can configure the out-of-store apps. So I said before I used the term out-of-the-box apps, and that's very much a vanilla Alfresco experience. But we realized the first things that you do when you get Alfresco is you add custom models and custom workflows. So we want to enable you to expose those on the mobile platform. So we're introducing configuration. Now, we've had some queries already at Summit as to why we can't use share. And in fact, we've got the reasons for that a bit later on. But one of the reasons is share is very HTML focused, and especially all the config from share is very HTML focused, to the point where you get free marker templates, bits of JavaScript, things like that don't really map. So it's going to take us some time before we can get nice configuration, if you like, but we're doing an awful lot of groundwork to make this available in the SDKs and the apps. I'll not talk too much more about configuration now, because I'm going to hand over to my colleague who will talk about it in a bit more depth. But just briefly before I leave this slide and hand over, the other things we're adding on the Android side are widgets, which is a nice little technology bonus that we can get on Android. We can put links into the apps, so you can get directly into folders and documents from your home screen. And on iOS, we want to try and leverage some of the bits that are already exposed on the Android side, and also some of the bits that Apple are allowing us to do in iOS 8. We had a look at them in some of the earlier betas, and they just weren't ready. So we figured we'd switched attention away. Now that iOS 8 is out, we'll start looking at how we can bring some of those features so you can expose Alfresco in other apps, and also bring other apps into Alfresco. We'll also be looking at MDM solutions. I'll talk a little bit about MDM. It's mobile device management, so it's how you securely roll out mobile apps. So if someone leaves an iPad in the back of a taxi, you can remotely wipe it and stop them from accessing the repository. Well, like I say, I'll talk a little bit about that later, and then go into that in more detail tomorrow. So for now, I'm going to hand over to Jean-Marie, who's going to talk to you about configuration and where we are today, and where we plan to go.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, as mentioned, one of the main domains we want to focus is about configuration. The idea and the problem is if you have ever developed against Alfresco, maybe the first thing you do is to create a custom model. After that, you create custom view, you add custom aspect and custom workflow. So you add your own business logic on Alfresco. The problem is if you go to the Alfresco app, you don't have this kind of information. So the problem is how we as Alfresco, as developers, can we provide something very simple to allow you create this configuration and to retrieve this configuration from the server. Currently, it's possible. You can do a fork, so you can fork our app or source code of our app, or you can create your own business application on top of our SDK. It works, but it costs. So the idea is we want to cost less and make your life easier. As Mike mentioned, we already have some configuration available on server side. It's generally the share web config. The only problem, it's not the good server. We focus only on the Alfresco repository, not on the Alfresco share application. The share config is, as it say, focused on share application, so it's not clearly, it doesn't clearly fit our needs when we talked about mobility and when we talked about mobile application. So what's exactly our requirements? The idea is we want no code. We want you add no code inside the app. You get the app out of the Google Play or the Apple Store, and you just have to add some configuration, some simple file inside the Alfresco repository, and automatically we will change everything for you. The other part we want to provide is we want to ship our app, so in, the source code, with some predefined configuration. So the idea is when you will want to create your own application, it will be possible to override this configuration and to ship it directly. So instead of configuring everything, changing the code, you just have to change some default file. Of course, one thing we want to focus is this configuration file will work on both platforms we support, so it will work on iOS and on Android. And of course, we do to this way because we want to support all versions of Alfresco, but also the newest one. So what's our solution? The solution is very, very simple. So you create a specific JSON file, you put it on a specific folder on your data dictionary inside the Alfresco repository. When our app, our default app, will connect to this repository, we will download and we will interpret this configuration file, and we will transform completely the user experience inside your app. Of course, a simple file can be tricky to manage, so the idea is we already have a long-term vision based on our public REST API. We will provide exactly the same features and maybe more that could help us and you as developer to create your own business logic application. One of the main advantage with this approach is the notion of scope. Currently, we don't have this focus, this feature around scope. When we retrieve all the configuration from the server, it's only available for everyone. The idea with the API is to focus more. I'm, for example, a typical user. I'm a sales guy. I'm a developer guy. I belong to this specific site or to this other site, and I retrieve these specific features, specific configuration for enable configuration and view inside the app. So where we are right now, we still have a lot of discussion about how we want to implement it, how we want to provide, what's the format of the JSON, what's the specific keys, etc. So we have still a lot of work, still a lot of discussion to have. But what I can present you today, it's we already have a first implementation available on Android and on iOS based on our SDK. So what do we support? First, we support custom views. So the idea, it's for specific views, so we can have, for example, a document library view. You can define, for example, I want a specific view for this specific folder inside my repository. So instead of browsing everything, you just have a shortcut which goes directly to a specific folder. So you can create, for example, a profile which combine this kind of custom views, and this kind of custom view can create clearly a kind of business logic that can help the user of the app to have very dedicated business view. Next, we have some custom menus. So for example, if we have a specific file to create, we have a specific mobile application to create some 3D or some business file, it's possible to map it to a specific create file menu to say, okay, I want to enable to let the user to create this specific MIME type, this specific file, to then open with a specific dedicated application on the device. We also have the same for the search. So we will enable all advanced search to specific, for example, custom properties or custom metadata. Next, maybe one of the most important, it's we will support the custom model. So if you create a custom model on Alfresco repository, it will be possible to display it directly inside the Alfresco application. So if you have created, for example, a specific company doc, it will be possible to say, the next time I will upload a document via the Alfresco application, I can choose this specific type during the upload. And when you can choose this specific type, we of course support all specific custom property associated. So automatically, during the upload, during the edition, we will generate automatically the form associated with the custom properties. So with the custom form, of course, we will support some custom fields. So we will support a simple field, so like number, text, date, etc. But we will also provide some more complex pickers, like user pickers, document pickers, or text pickers, that will enable to create easily a custom form based on your custom properties. So the idea is, because it's available, I will show you a simple demo based on the video, so if it works. So the idea is we are on the Android application. Here you have a default specific menu. So here we have a pop-up that display a configuration is available. So for the moment, the menu on the right is the default one. So you have access to share file, my file, etc. So here we have access to the profile, and here we can say a new specific action button. It's the profile, and here you have the list of profile you want to access, or the administrator has made available for you. So the idea, you have a default, business, another profile. Just to illustrate, so for example here, I display a specific business-oriented profile, and say, it's a shortcut to a specific, for example, list of tasks with high priority inside it. So here it was all specific shortcut, and because we can enable it on all our different views, you can have also access to profiles, to document, to tasks, to nearly anything you have actually present in your Alfresco repository. So with that, just only that, you can transform completely the experience we can provide to a mobile user. And I think it's really, really important, and with very few line of code or configuration to create. And I think you will enjoy it. So the next step, the idea is we want to release this first version, so based on a file that you can put on your Alfresco repository. On the next major version, so the 1.5 for Android and the 2.1 on iOS. We will release early 2015. In longer term, we want to provide simple configuration UI, so based maybe on mobile, on the web application. That would allow you to create even easier this configuration file. Next, eventually, during 2005 and with the help of the Alfresco repository team, we will create the REST API and service associated to let you, as a developer, to create your own application and retrieve this configuration also to create your own specific application. And that's all for me. Give back to Mike.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. Configuration stuff is, we're putting a lot of work into it, and we're quite proud of where it is today, and we're already getting a lot of attention for where we want to take it, and we think it'll help people like yourselves really deploy apps that are more suitable to your customers, your employees, and really help boost mobile with Alfresco. So just want to spend a couple of slides quickly talking about mobile device management. It's another area that we're concentrating on. Mobile device management is all about data control and data protection. And in a way, it also reduces support costs and business risks by managing data loss. One of the problems that companies have is that people are uploading sensitive documents into Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, you name it. And that could well be outside the control of the IT department. So you have a couple of problems. You have the problem when they lose the device and it might have sensitive content on it. And you also have a problem that when that employee leaves, that account, their Dropbox account, is very likely associated to them and not the company. So the best way of doing it is to try and get them to use a sanction system that gives you the control. And mobile device management is an upcoming thing that people are finding is necessary when they roll out mobile to their company. So the sort of thing it gives you is it allows configurations and policies to be pushed to the users. You can decide that your sales team, for example, is not allowed to take photos and videos. These are obviously made up scenarios. Your technical team aren't allowed to email confidential documents. You can switch off certain aspects of apps, and you can do all that centrally in a group-based policy config. And it keeps IT happy with bring your own device. So it doesn't matter that you've got company documents on your phone, because they're in a secure enclave, and there's a few apps that you're allowed to share that content with, but they're all within this MDM environment. The sort of people we're talking to, and there's quite a few players in this space at the moment, good technology, and in fact we already have an app in the store that is based on a slightly older code base, but it's still on the SDK, and that works with good technology. So it'll integrate with Active Directory on Windows. It'll proxy connections so you can connect into intranets without opening up firewalls. And it enables loss control as well centrally. So you can lock out devices. All the files are stored in a secure container, and you basically, what happens is it throws away the key for that container, and so you can no longer get to those documents. Other people like Symantec, Citrix, and Mobile Iron, we're concentrating on mostly the sort of Symantec, Mobile Iron out of those three. They all have solutions for iOS and Android, which is why we're interested in them. So we'll be rolling out solutions over time on these platforms. The other thing we're noticing is that Apple and Google are starting to pick up on the MDM space and realizing that people are using these devices in enterprises, and they obviously want to try and push people in business to use these devices. So actually what they've done is they've now taken this aspect of things seriously. They've got an awful lot of information on their sites about how you can control app rollouts, how you can manage device loss on both platforms that work on the whole device usually. Google Apps, I think you can include Google Apps in a secure enclave, but you can't include third-party apps. And this is where people like Good Technology and Symantec are picking up the third-party support. But it's also worth looking at, if you are rolling out devices to customers, look at what the OS vendors have already got out there. The brief MDM introduction. I'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow in the session with Mark, talking about enabling a mobile workforce, which is more about how you might roll out Alfresco to a mobile environment, and lots of different ways of doing that. So we'll go into a bit more depth on MDM, and also Mark will talk about how people are using mobile already with Alfresco. Thank you very much for listening. Been very patient. I can already see your hand up. So, I'll accept.
Mobile solution, do we have to configure it in addition to the current Alfresco solution?
For now, yes. For now, this the kind of rolling roadmap that we're doing. We need to, as I sort of mentioned, we sit alongside the Alfresco One teams, and so we want to be able to enable people to have the configurable apps on older versions of the repositories. So what we're doing is we're rolling out an initiative that's hand-coded JSON file that sits in somewhere we can get to. But the eventual idea is that yes, there'll be the ability to pull in existing configuration and convert it into a format that we can use, and that'll be addressable, and there'll be user interfaces around it. All that stuff is long-term plan. But yes, eventually.
And is there a separate licensing fees for the mobile?
No, there isn't.
If you buy the Alfresco edition, then that covers
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So large enterprises will pretty much have to have MDM as in place to be able to deploy Alfresco onto their devices. Now, two questions. First one being, what is your likely roadmap or desired roadmap on actually having MDM support across those four or the three consolidated solutions?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question is, on those given platforms, be it semantic or mobile IN or good, is the expectation that development teams will be taking like a baseline that can then allow them to deal with apps that can be deployed into those shims?
So yes, the first question. So we already have a mobile iron solution on Android that we're working with a few select partners to roll out. And we're getting feedback from that and seeing if there's any problems, but that'll become generally available fairly soon. Mark's the man to talk about roadmaps and dates and things like that. We also have a Symantec solution. They have a testing system called the Gauntlet test. So we run the tests internally. We then have to submit to Symantec and they run the tests. That process is currently ongoing, so that'll be relatively soon on both platforms. Good is a little bit more complicated because they don't have wrapping solutions for either platform. So that's an SDK integration, and that's going to take us a bit more time. What we're finding, and this kind of goes into your second question, is that what we want to do is just have the store apps in the MDM environment, and so once we've got the configuration as well, an MDM solution is just another configuration source point, if you like. So you can deliver the configuration from the MDM solution and customize the app in the same way. So at the moment, we're juggling development of configuration and development of MDM. And we're trying to, and eventually they will link in together. So yes, you'll be able to deploy the store apps and customize it via the MDM solution. Again, it'll just take a little bit of time to get there. Thank you, everyone. If you enjoyed the talk, or even if you didn't, there's some survey forms at the back that I've been asked to point you towards. Thank you very much for listening.